Welcome to CMDR Central, episode 350, and today we're going to take a look at, well, basically the last 349 shows, I guess, to a degree, and kind of reminisce about some good old times. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Gentlemen, how's it going today on this snowy Friday morning?
I have pants on. For this occasion, I put pants on, everybody.
Nice.
We're not going to talk about
Max.
what I'm wearing right now.
Hey, Chris just got done blowing snow out of his driveway.
Yep. So that I might be, pretty darn close to being very inappropriate for public settings.
Role reversal, gotcha. Okay.
And I'm still like sweating, really bad. And I'm like, oh, I'm so hot.
I've seen that everybody I basically follow on Twitter in the Midwest is like, I just got done shoveling 7 inches of wet, sloppy snow. And I'm like, oh man, I do not. Yeah, I don't miss that currently, having to deal with all that. So for sure.
Literally this year, I've been tempted now to just go buy a 4-wheeler. I can use it for other purposes too, but the biggest purpose is
just put a plow on it.
Yes,
sure.
Not have to worry about it,
and turn it into something actually fun versus like something that's a giant annoyance.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's not the kind of thing I miss very much at all. So at least spring is finally here, and we're almost past all this BS.
Agreed.
Anyone play any fun games at all this week? Max didn't get out to the shop. You didn't play much at all in any format, Chris?
I went and played Pokemon last night because Connor wanted to go. I went 3-1, lost a very close game in the finals.
Kids.
So no, we're all adults that are playing. I'm in the Masters division. It's all kids, 16 or older.
There are kids, but I'm joking. There's plenty of adults in there. There's more kids that play that than Magic, but it's still a lot of adults.
Yeah, I actually met a new player. And a couple of the players were talking about, oh, how expensive the deck is. And I started laughing. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, so how much does that deck cost you? He's like, oh, it cost me like $120. I'm like, that's like two cards in one of my decks.
So it's a budget deck is what you're saying.
Yeah, I wish Magic was that cheap because I would just be like, woo, I got every card known to man.
Well, I put together a Zabraz, the Glimmer Wasp modular deck that was a budget deck. And it's a budget deck in that, I think I spent, $20 picking up the cards I didn't have for it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of stuff I put into it was just stuff I had lying around. So I'm like, I wasn't really paying attention to the budget. Obviously, I wasn't putting anything expensive in it, but even once you start throwing in, hey, this card is 45 cents and this card's 60 cents and this one's 75, and over the course of 100 cards, even if you're not really paying attention, yes, it's a budget deck, but once I looked at the actual cost of the deck, it was still a $60 deck, even though I only spent 20 on it. But I had enough of those 75-cent cards that I wasn't paying attention to that I just threw into it. Oh yeah, even that budget list wasn't really a budget list. I mean, that's just how kind of Commander works these days, I guess.
Oh, so you're telling me you went to that landfill and found a collection?
I should have. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. How sweet would that have been?
I mean, ignore the cat pee smell. It's fine.
Right. Yeah.
We have actually had that. So at the store, shortly after they first opened, someone brought in a collection and warned them ahead of time that the cat had gotten on top of them before he was able to bring them in. So we had to store them and let them air out before we could go through them because it was pretty bad.
One of my cats did that years ago. They crawled. I was keeping a booster box of all draft shaft in a gym bag, and they like to play in the gym bag. And I'm like, why do these cards reek? I'm like, oh dang it! I was more mad about the bag being ruined than the 300 commons and uncommons I didn't keep.
Oh man. I mean, one thing about this hobby, it gives you plenty of stories to tell, I suppose.
Well, it's an understatement.
We've definitely, in the past, talked about this, but we'll bring it up again, because that's what we're doing here today. When Max and I used to go buy collections on occasion, my favorite one that we had was, we went to pick up a collection from these two, I think they were brothers living in an apartment, and they gave us their address, so we got there, and when we walked up to the front door, there was a baby stroller, a broken baby stroller missing a wheel, sitting next to the front door, mounded over with cigarette butts, because it was being used as an ashtray, so everyone would go outside and smoke, and they'd put the butt in this broken baby stroller. It literally, it wasn't like there was 20 or 50 or 100 cigarette butts in it. It was years of cigarette butts to the point where it was a mound of them. If you saw that in a movie, you'd be like, that's ridiculous. No one would really do that. That's over the top. But it was really what was there. That was the first thing we saw when we walked up.
See, what I want to know is how it started. Like, who is the one who started it?
Let's start using the stroller as an ashtray.
Yeah, my guess is they would walk out onto the deck and just chuck them off of it onto the stroller because it was probably broken prior to them.
Yeah, I'm assuming so, yeah. And that was exactly how the rest of the transaction went. They were super weird and like scratching themselves. And
they wanted it over quickly. Like,
yes.
Give us your money and get out.
To the point where I believe, if I remember correctly, we bought the boxes. Like, okay, we'll take them. We gave them like $50 or something, I think it was.
Probably.
And they were like leaving. They were going to just leave us there to carry the stuff out of their apartment. Like they were in that much of a hurry to go, buy meth or whatever it was. I don't even know. I guess I shouldn't assume that, but like they were
it's
ready
Wisconsin.
to go.
Like that's from my understanding by everything that like you can look this stuff up, like crime rates and stuff in cities and stuff. And like the biggest drug crime in Wisconsin is the methamphetamines.
Yeah, I mean they had that vibe about them. Let's just say. So.
Yeah.
As long as they're not hurting anybody, just
I guess,
lock yourself in your house and leave everybody else alone.
But yeah, we often like we used to go like pretty often as a team like that. Like this seems kind of sketchy. We better have one other person with me just to be sure.
Yeah, you gotta do that.
My favorites would be like I'd get a random text at like 7:00 at night, and Dana's like, "If you don't hear from me in 20 minutes, I was at this gas station. The person I'm meeting is in like a black Chevy Malibu. I'll call you later." And then like he'll call me. I'm like, "Okay, you're alive. That's great."
Log into my iCloud because this is a picture of their license plate will be in there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, it's been a long time since I've bought a collection though.
Well, I think the reason for that, I was actually thinking about this the other day. I think the reason is that everyone started catching on, especially when COVID hit. I noticed with working for a card store that everyone thought that their collections were worth a lot of money and they were looking them up and everything. So it wasn't just random people like, hey, I just want to get rid of all this stuff in my closet for, like $100 or something like that. They actually did some legwork and were trying to get way more than what it, in all real world aspect, is what it's worth.
And I think they were taking it all in there, and they were taking it to shops versus like trying to sell it on Craigslist or whatever. Because I just don't even see listings anymore for the most part. Yeah.
Is Craigslist a thing still? I didn't even know that was a thing still.
I said Craigslist. I think it is, but yeah, I don't mean that's all I ever really used it for was buying Magic collections, and I don't really go back now that I don't see them there anymore or whatever. So yeah, I'm assuming it is. Well, so tickets just went on sale this week for it's not a Magic Fest, is it? What is it? Magic Con? Minneapolis, which is the first week in May, and we're just discussing this off the air, but we like, well, we might as well just talk about it on the air because Max and I are going to be there. We'll be there all 3 days. So if you guys, if anyone out there is going to be in Minneapolis for that, Max and I will be there. So make sure to find us and we'll play some games. Chris is not sure yet. He's hoping to come over on Saturday. Is that correct, Chris?
Yep. Yeah. So for everyone listening, I have another appointment in Rochester. This is a usual checkup. It's going to be a biopsy. For those of you that don't know, they're going to jam this like 12-foot needle into me. And, no, not quite that big. They're going to take a couple of pieces of flesh, like tiny microscopic pieces off of my new kidney and do tests on it, make sure that there's no rejection, everything looks good. But the recovery period, like I just had one done 2 weeks ago and I still have a giant bruise on me. So we'll see how I'm feeling afterwards because that's literally, I do that the 1st and the 2nd, and the new Magic Con's the 5th and the 6th or something like that.
Yeah.
So it'll be close. My plan is to get up there at some point. I'll probably bring the wife, and if I can only stay for an hour or two, I can stay for an hour or two and just sit and jaw jack with people. That's fine by me. I don't have to play as long as I get to see everyone and say hi.
Very cool. Yeah, hopefully, because it's been years. When's the last time you were at an event, Chris? Do you know?
Would it have been Minneapolis? The last time we all went to Minneapolis, or Madison?
So the last event I went to was, I think it was in September of last year. I went to a team event for Modern. Okay. It was like Modern Legacy Pioneer because they needed a third person, and I said, sure, I'll go because I couldn't find anybody else. And they had been playtesting, and then their Modern partner had dropped out because he couldn't make it anymore. I'm like, sure. So I just willy-nilly grabbed a deck and went, and we didn't do the greatest.
But it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault.
Right, yes, yeah.
Actually, it wasn't. I think I drew 2 of the games, lost 1 and won 1. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was doing bad by any means.
Well, it's what's funny about this particular topic is if we look back at, shows, 349 shows ago, the first episode we ever did was talking about playing Commander at an event, at a GP. And so that show aired August 13th in 2017. That's insane. So like almost, 5.5 years ago. And that was before they were doing Command Fest, that was just
zone. Like we were playing on any table we could find.
And that was one of the things we talked about in that show, because I listened to it, and we're talking about like going to events and having to find places to play, whether it's at the tables with ketchup on them from in the food area, or having to find a table and hope that they don't schedule a draft or an event there, so you get bumped on their tables. Like that was what it was like that first year or two of those events when we were doing the show and talking about it. It was like how to find a safe place to play, because there wasn't just a lot of opportunities at those events. Whereas now, they first put in that command zone in Vegas, and now we go to those events and like there's giant dedicated areas just for Commander, which is super cool. But it's a big change from literally the first show we did.
Yeah, I remember back with those original events, the GPs and that stuff. The vendors, when they were there, all the singles that they brought with them were specifically dedicated to the format that was being played at the GP. Yeah. And now when you go to them, the last ones that I've been to, they actually have a broad stuff there, where it's like, because they know that the Commander players are going to be there, so they're going to need like Commander staples. They know that, like Modern, because Modern took off shortly after that. They're going to want all these staples. So they brought, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cards with them to sell to people, and it was amazing to see that transformation too.
Yeah. Well, and I guess we'll note this with Minneapolis as well, because at Philadelphia, you had to, which was the event 3 weeks ago, you had to pay to get into the command zone area, the separate area, and people were just playing elsewhere because of that. They were kind of annoyed by that. That's not going to be how it's going to be in Minneapolis. In Minneapolis, if you pay whatever it is to get in for the day, which is also relatively reasonable, I thought, the daily pass, that's everything. So you can go and play in the command zone, you can play whatever. You still have to do on-demand events if you want to do that. Those are a separate cost. But if you just want to come in and play Commander or do whatever, there isn't some separate cost for the command zone area. That's just all included. So
I thought I saw Sheldon post something on Facebook about that too, where he was going to look into that because he didn't think that was right as well. Like where you paid for something but you weren't getting access to it.
Well, so there's two layers to that. Yeah, so there was that portion and where people like thought they could go in and play Commander and they couldn't get into the command zone. And there was also the portion where content creators who were given passes to go for free, like, hey, we want you to come to this event, so you don't got to pay to get in the door. Here's your pass. Didn't come with command zone access. So like, people
really?
So even like people like Sheldon were like, oh yeah, you can't go in the command zone without buying a separate. He's like, well, that's insane. You guys invited me to come to this thing.
Oh, I could see Sheldon come walking in and like, oh, we can't let you in. What? And be like, okay, bye.
I want to meet the person who has the goals to look at Sheldon Memory and be like, yeah, you can't come in the command zone.
It'll cost you $25 more to come in there and play Commander.
It would probably be some person who doesn't know him, very well or anything. Yes. And they're just like, I'm sorry, I can't let you in. And he's just like, okay. I'll go over here and sit at this table and play some games with people, and then someone's gonna be like, oh, Sheldon's sitting outside, no one will let him in, and then the guys from Command Zone come running out there, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm guessing that's why it's all included now and it's not a separate thing, is because of that kind of stuff. So yes, that was kind of funny to see. So yeah, if you go to Minneapolis, it'll be easy to get into wherever you want to play, and Max and I will be there all 3 days, and hopefully we'll have Chris there on Saturday. And then we'll put this probably on Twitter since we won't be able to announce it on the show. But Max and I are going to be over in the area in Minneapolis a couple days earlier too, and we might find an LGS to go play at some night, probably Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, but we'll put something on Twitter. We're not sure what shop, but we've talked to a couple other people that are going to be in Minneapolis too. So we might get like a little mini con at a shop going on Tuesday night. If anyone is in the area, either living there or just going to be there early, we'll post that out there so people can maybe come to that as well. It's not going to be anything formal, but just like, hey, we'll be at this shop, Tuesday at 4:00 when anyone wants to come play.
I don't even know any big shops in the area neither. Even with all my traveling from tournaments, usually the shops that we went to, you walk in there and they have enough room for like 70 people at the most. So if they have an event going on too and you guys show up, it's going to be like, uh-oh.
Lodestone is pretty big, and I was talking to Jason Vickery from Beetle and Grimm, which is a shop that does like high-end D&D stuff.
Okay.
And he's in Minneapolis, and Jason plays at I think it's called The Source.
The Source, I know where that is.
So it'll probably be one of those two places that when it gets a little bit closer, I'll figure it out. We'll post something out there on private accounts, and probably even the main CMDR Central account, which we're not going to close down. We'll leave that up. So we'll post that kind of stuff out there if anyone wants to come find us as well.
Yeah, have fun if you guys go to The Source. You ever been there? It's a very interesting shop.
I have not been in there.
Yeah, I was taken there when we were up there for some event. We went there one night, and it was very cool to go in there. I mean, it's definitely a different store by far, but it's definitely got a lot of room in it as well. So
Good to know.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Well, Max, you said you had some funny little facts or something here for us. You want to lay on us here?
So I went through kind of like all of our episodes, or tried to, and just found some cool stats. So
Okay.
do you guys want to take a stab at how many deck techs we've done?
Oh man.
275.
Not that high. Not that high.
We had to have done 60 to 70, I'm going to guess, right?
Dana's closer.
Oh, I figured I was way off, but
We've done a total of about 98.
Wow.
that's
The first
amazing.
one we did was in December of 2017.
That is crazy.
We've also done, do you want to guess how many set reviews we've done?
Well, I looked, and of our first 10 shows, 3 or 4 of them were set reviews.
Set reviews, yeah.
and that was before things got as fast as they are today in terms of release. How many
There's
set
what,
reviews?
10 sets a year at least. So
But oftentimes we split them up too. In the early days, especially, we'd do like
yeah,
2 different ones. Again, Max, I'm gonna guess 50 to 60. Unless we did deck techs, I think.
I don't even know because I don't even know the cards in the new sets anymore. Like people are like, oh yeah, this card's cool, and I'm like, what card's
They're
that?
all fake. They're all fake cards.
Yeah, right.
Chris. So I mainly figured this out by looking up what sets came out from when we started to now. So we're somewhere between 28 and 35. Like Dana said, some sets we did together, like we did Midnight Haunt and Crimson Vow as a
Sure.
single set review. Other sets we did, let's talk about the legendary creatures and then talk about everything else.
Now,
So
did you
yeah,
count the commander releases too?
I did count those as well. So
Okay.
that's why I think we're closer to the 35 number than the high 20s. Because, like, we didn't do one for, like, Conspiracy or Conspiracy 2 or Battle Bond, but
Oh,
we
sure.
did them for Modern Horizons and those weird extra sets we sometimes talked about.
I don't believe those numbers. There had to have been at least 3,000 sets released since then. Because it seems like it's every other
It
week a new
definitely
set's
feels-
coming
yeah,
out.
right. I was actually just thinking that this morning. I woke up and I was like, man, we haven't had spoilers in a couple weeks. Like, we got to be about ready to hit the next one.
Dana, be quiet.
That's gonna jinx it, right?
And then we did start that, like, the more of our discussion shows, the for your consideration topics. We did 13 of those.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I would have thought that might have, particularly in the early days, there was, and I think that's something that's also changed about the format. As the format's gotten more stable, we've had less bans, less rule changes. But at least for the first year, or maybe your first year or two, when Commander was really ramping up there was a few more larger bans and a few more like this particular thing is a rule change that happened that impacted the format. So we would do a show about that. Like I remember when Planeswalkers became legendary and they
Yep.
weren't beforehand. So talking about that, I think we talked about the tuck change in one when that was a thing that switched out. So like there were like a little bit bigger rule changes that we actually would then talk about on the show that we really don't have anymore. Like there hasn't been a really big, I mean, there's been a few bans, but like we haven't had rule changes that impact anything really the way we maybe did 5 or 6 years ago.
We talked about Brawl. That's another fun fact. We did a show about if
Really?
Brawl was going to be better than EDH.
I did not remember doing that.
I don't even remember what Brawl was. That was the mini commander, right?
That was the arena format. So, like, the
Yeah.
standard commander, lower
where you-
life total.
Was that the one where you could use a planeswalker and then a named spell with it?
I think so.
That's- No, that's
Oathbreaker.
Oathbreaker. Yeah,
Oh,
a Brawl was just standard commander, right?
Yeah, it was
okay.
commander, but only cards
Rotating.
legal and standard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we talk about tiny leaders or whatever it was?
I think that was previous to the like that had already started and then kind of fizzled before we started recording.
Okay.
I think.
Oh man. Now I'm going way back in time. Like my mind is, I'm like thinking I'm 20 years old again.
Oh, I wish I could be 20 years old again.
Are there any particular shows that like stand out to anybody that you really enjoyed talking about? So one of my favorite ones, and the reason I asked this was we did a show. I think it was episode 40. Let me see, it's my notes here. 43, where we talked about interesting interactions. So like we went over weird rule things, and this has since been changed, but at the time there was this weird rule with, I think it was Oblivion Ring. Was it either Oblivion Ring or Banishing
Yeah.
Light? If your commander was exiled under one of them, you could optionally, obviously when something gets exiled, you can put it in the command zone. But if that enchantment was still there and your commander was still in the command zone and it got removed, you could pull your commander back from the command zone into play because there was some weird weird rules interaction that they've since changed. But things like that we talked about, a bunch of these weird rule interactions. And we had a list of like 15 different ones we went over. And that was super cool. I remember like enjoying all these weird ones we found to talk about. Is there any ones from you guys in particular that jump out?
I always liked going back, like after we did a set review, and we'd go back like a few months later and be like, hey, I actually decided to run this card or not run that card. And
yes,
talk about, like, I always liked when we talked about the changes we made to our decks and how they impacted our gameplay.
That was, I think, also way easier to do in the early days when you'd have 4 sets a year, so because you could make changes and then like play those cards for 3 or 4 months and actually get a feel for what you wanted to try or remove or whatever. Whereas it happens so fast today, like it's much more difficult, I think, to retroactively go back, particularly because when we would wait 3 months and talk about the previous set, it was the previous set, right?
Yep.
If we wait 3 or 4 months now, it's like, so 4 sets ago when I added this card, it becomes way more difficult to do that than it was again in that first year or two of the show, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, because it's just funny looking at some of the things, we did a show talking about Battle Bond.
Yeah.
Yes, Battle Bond is awesome.
And a lot of little stuff too that I enjoyed some of the shows we did early on where we would just talk about ways to kind of improve your play experience, like how to make the game go slightly faster or just to speed things up when you're playing, like what you can do to shortcut things so you're like spending more time playing and less time doing the little upkeep and minutia things you have to do to keep playing, or like how to bluff when you're playing Commander. So like we did a lot of those early on as well, mechanical things like that were good for the game that those were fun to do as well, and I think very useful.
Yes, agreed. I love bluffing in EDH. It's so much fun.
Yeah, for sure.
But 90% of the time I'm not bluffing, and then, I'll show my hand and be like, I'm really not bluffing, so.
Well, like one of the things I remember us having this conversation early on too was we wanted to have the podcast be a thing where like after you listen to it for your 45 minutes or whatever it was, you would walk away feeling like you learned something that you didn't previously know, whether it was a new card or a new interaction or just like we're thinking about something a little bit different. And I was really actually proud of that. I really enjoyed the fact that I felt like that was something we accomplished, where your time invested in listening to the show wasn't just entertainment, it was like actually useful to you as a player as well. The only problem with that is like at some point you run out of things you can kind of teach and talk about too. There's only, the list of those things is not infinitely long. And so yeah, we did a lot of those, especially early on. And I liked the fact that we did that.
Well, yeah, I suppose, nowadays you can't really do that kind of stuff because there was so much going on in the world of Commander between the set reviews and, new people that you're playing with and new decks and everything. It was just like you can't actually just sit down and actually talk about the game itself.
Well, and it was also a situation where, because having the conversation before we started recording the first episode, we're like, oh, we should do a Commander podcast. And like, I can't remember who made the joke, but it was like, yeah, we've got a pretty good chance of being the 4th best Commander podcast because there's only 3 of them. So like you could do a topic too early on that no one else was doing because you could literally check. I could be like, let me look at the last 10 Command Zone episodes or Commanders Brew episodes or Commander and episodes. Like, nope, no one talked about this. Cool, let's talk about it. Whereas today you just couldn't do that when there's 100 different Commander shows per week that air. Everything is going to be covered, and you can't go check to see like, oh, has anyone talked about this? And it's just too many options too. So like that's also been something that's changed and made it a little more difficult over the years. I think it's great that people have so many things to listen to, but it's a different ecosystem than it was in 2017.
Oh, that's an understatement.
Yeah,
the games were different too. I actually found the games more fun back in the early days than I do now because there's just so much going on. It's so many interactions, and back in the day it was just straightforward. Well, I think this card's fun to play, so I'm going to play it instead of being for efficiency because you only had like 3 other cards of that type anyways.
And this stuff changes depending on your meta too. I guess one thing I would say I've noticed a little bit playing around here is there's been kind of an arc where everyone's decks, I felt like, ramped up in power over the course of a few years. And now I feel like people have begun swinging the other direction where they're like, oh, I don't need to run tutors anymore. I've done that. I've gone through all that stuff. I don't need to run this card anymore. I've had my fun. I've got to do the Primal Surge and put 40 permanents into play, or I've got to do this weird combo that, won me the game. I've done it a few times and I'm looking to do something else. So that's definitely something I think I've felt the last few years was people had ramped up that power and the speed, and now they've brought it back the other direction because they're like, yeah, I've done it. I'm ready to, like, I want to play something sillier or get the good experience, and I will work my kind of spikier tendencies out in a different format. So at least that's kind of the vibe I've gotten. I'm not sure if you've seen that at all, Max.
Yeah, I mean, I am not around as often as you are in the shop.
Sure.
But yeah, I definitely was around for when that big power level jump happened. I don't know. I still run tutors. I like to win, so.
Sure, sure. The one thing I would say has definitely changed is there was a time, again, early on when I would, when we first started 2017, 2018, I'd play a lot of games where people would play things that you're like, oh, well, that's not a threat at all. I don't need to worry about that thing. That doesn't really happen anymore. I feel like every card in people's decks is a threat. People might not be running exclusively busted stuff, but they're not wasting slots. For the most part, if a card is in someone's deck, it's in their deck for a reason, and it is going to be a problem in some way, shape, or form. And I think that is definitely, the one thing I've changed, or I've noticed, is even if people's decks aren't maybe crazy fast or, aren't running like super powerful combos, people just aren't. There's not a lot of fat on their list anymore the way there was 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 or 8 years ago even. And probably that's in part because there's just so many different resources, whether it's EDH Rec or shows like us, or gameplay videos where you can just see them like, oh, that card will be much better than this one thing I'm running. And once you make enough of those changes, your deck just becomes something that's has to be reckoned with. And I think even if you're not running crazy fast mana or running tutors, when every card is somehow a potential problem in your deck, games are just going to close out faster than they were before. So that's, I think, the amount of times I've had a game go 2.5 hours because people weren't threatening wins has really diminished. At this point, a long game is an hour-long game because there's just so many ways for folks to win games these days.
Challenge accepted for Minneapolis.
I'm going to dirtle.
I was just about to say that, Chris.
Turtle deck incoming.
4-hour game. You guys better be ready for this. I got the perfect deck. The store owner's got one sitting there.
No, not that deck.
Planeswalkers.wrath effects.
Yep.
And I'm going to do nothing but play a Planeswalker, draw a card, and go, another wrath.
Any more trivia here for us, Max?
No, I do not have any more trivia. I busted it all. But here's something I always thought was kind of cool, just as like a co-host, was having Chris work at the store. Like, I think that is a cool way to, like, talk about Magic. Like, you see it from the customer side and, like, the ordering side of everything. So you kind of get to see how the food is cooked there for a little bit, Chris. Yeah,
it's definitely an eye-opener for sure. You get to learn everything, from the background of it. And it's not all, sunshines and rainbows. I'll tell you all that.
Well, but Rudy makes it look so good on YouTube.
Right, exactly, yeah.
That's a lot of editing and, what do the kids call it on TikTok? Filters or something like that?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, so when we started the show, Max and I had done a show prior to this that went, was it 25 episodes, Max?
30, 32.
30, whatever, yeah. So Max and I had some experience, and you didn't. So Max and I started off having done 30-ish episodes. Chris hadn't, and had to kind of play catch up a little bit. But Chris, having listened to a few old ones here recently, and then obviously I listened to our new ones too, not like you were bad early on, but you have just clearly gotten way more comfortable doing this in those early days. So I just wanted to point that out, that you have really stepped up over the course of the years, having to like learn how to do this. And I don't know if you intentionally were like trying to learn, but like it was a noticeable improvement over the years, and you've gotten very, very good at doing this. So
well, thank you.
Good job.
Yeah, I know the biggest issue that I always had when we first started recording was you don't want to try to interrupt someone when they're talking. You know, like if we're just sitting out having supper, jaw jacking and all that stuff, you can say your 2 cents, in the middle of whatever.
Sure.
But when you're actually recording something, you want to be able to let them finish their point so they can get off what they're trying to say. And then you can say, because someone's listening to you. It's not like you're just talking amongst yourselves. So that was like the biggest thing for me that I always had an issue with, was like, oh, this idea popped in my head. I got to say it right now. And I'm like, nope, just think about it. And
right.
Ever since we started doing it like remotely from, our own houses and whatnot, I actually have a notebook that's next to me. So if an idea pops in my head, I write it down quick when someone else is talking, just so I don't forget it.
Oh, that's actually a really good idea. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Well, now you tell me that after we were recording our last episode.
Well, you can take that with you to EDH, right?
I guess, right? Yeah. Okay. If I have another podcast, I can use that skill for sure. So yeah, and same thing for you, Max. Like, because you are relatively introverted as a person too. So like, this is outside your comfort zone. So like, every week you have to get in front of a microphone and talk, and that's not your favorite thing to do either. And
Yeah, very true.
having to figure that out every week is a challenge. And you've always stepped up.
Well, thank you. And you have always led the show very well, Dana.
But when you guys have to drive, like if I'm not here or something too, like that's always, I have always been impressed with that as well. Because that's not something that you're used to. So, and you guys have taken turns doing that at different times. Man, have always done great.
Yeah, we didn't get us canceled, Chris. Look at that.
Well, and you know what, since we're shouting folks out, Rafael Garcia editing the show for the last 200 episodes-ish. I didn't go back and check and see where he started.
I know where. Give me 30 seconds. I actually have
29.
Sure.
28.
It was like February of 2021, 2019 maybe. Raphael took over in the middle of January 2020.
Okay.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, so they've done a fantastic job editing the show for 3 years as well and have become part of the team and part of the voice you see here. So that's been super cool as well. So yeah, great job, Raphael. Thanks a lot for that. Moving forward, like we're done doing this show weekly. Life has made it, more and more challenging. And like we talked about, the landscape has changed out there. So, we felt like we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. I always liked a show Max introduced me to years and years ago that is no longer out there was a show called The Girlfriend Bracket, Aaron Campbell's early podcast. And they wrapped up, I think episode 100 was the last one they did when they were going. And I always liked the fact that they had an ending in mind. At some point they're like, okay, we're going to wrap it up in 8 or 10 episodes, and episode 100 will be our last one. And it was a nice round number. I was like that. They things didn't melt down. They just were like, oh, nope, we've reached the end. We all our lives have changed. We are ready to be done. So episode 100 will be our last one. So it's nice for us to be able to do the same thing here. Like we're going out on our own terms, so to speak. And that's, I think, a good way to end something. That said, I would not be surprised if you guys listening out there just randomly get notices here or there like, hey, Commander Central episode 351 is up. I think we're just going to once in a while get a motivated to quick record something that, whether it's talking about a change or something that happened, whatever. So think of this as more semi-retirement than anything. You'll probably occasionally get something from us down the road. We're still friends. We all still have equipment. We still play Commander. So things will occasionally happen. So I think we'll throw that out there as well.
Yeah, especially with, in-person events coming back.
The
new sets, once Gandalf comes riding in on Optimus Prime.
Exactly.
Like I said,
exactly. Save everything. Yeah.
And I just have to jump on and be like, told y'all was going to happen.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah. That's to go off on a tangent. I'm really curious about how they're going to wrap this storyline up with Phyrexians to compare it to like when War of the Spark was happening. That was probably the last big, huge storyline we had where Bolus and all his zombies were invading Ravnica. And that I was like, well, I assume the good guys were going to win. And even though I didn't know what the mechanism was going to be for his defeat, you're still like, there's a bunch of ways that can end. There's almost anything they can write that they want to that's going to be Bolus losing, and that's okay. On the other hand, right now, the storyline that we're seeing with the Phyrexians invading everywhere, basically, there's the hints that they're in 15 different planes, basically, where we've seen everything from Alara to Innistrad to Ixalan. I'm genuinely curious, since they seem to be just dominating every place they go in the storyline. I'm baffled as to how they are going to resolve that isn't them winning. So I'm very, very curious because I'm struggling to come up with many outs for how that story's going to end.
I'm curious about this as well. I actually saw something pop up about the new Deadpool movie that's coming out. That says that, well, this is where I'm going to lead into it. Don't worry. Where they said that this is where the multiverse is starting to crumble, is in the new Deadpool movie, where everything's starting to come to a head. So I wonder if, for all you, Marvel nerds out there that know everything about the comics and all that, if that has something to do, if they're going to go that route. I don't know how they fix the multiverse or anything like that in the Marvel system. And maybe that's something similar to what they're going to do. if they do a mass reset or something, I don't know.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what the solution they come up with that is satisfactory. I am on board. I'm looking forward to seeing it because I'm just baffled about what it possibly could be. So hopefully they stick the landing. I am cheering for them to do so. But yeah, I'm having a tough time envisioning what that looks like, particularly because we already know what the two fall sets are. We know it's Ixalan, the wilds of Eldraine, and
the caves of Ixalan, the lost
whatever it is.
Of Ixalan,
Lost Caverns of Ixalan. But it's not like Eldraine, the smoking ruins of Eldraine, or Ixalan burnt to a crisp, right? Like those sets seem to imply that things aren't horrible. And maybe those are false names. Well, I guess we'll find out. But so it would seem like the invasion of all those places fails. I guess we'll see in the next few weeks because we're not very far away from this final set coming out in the storyline. But I am looking forward to it. I am more excited about the current storyline than I have been for any storyline in Magic since I've been playing. I'm really looking forward to seeing where it's going.
I hope they do something along the lines where the Phyrexians overreach and they go into another plane of existence and they find the actual Eldrazi, what an Eldrazi actually is, and realize, we screwed up, run away, and they just get nuked out of existence.
I just don't want them to lose necessarily either. Like, that's one of the things that they've had a problem with. And talking about Marvel, in Marvel's early days, they tended to do that too, where they'd like use a villain for a movie, then like kill the villain off or whatever. And at some point, you run out of villains.
Yes.
Don't kill them off. Like, maybe they overextend and lose somehow, but like have them out there as a threat. Because we've already lost the Eldrazi for the most part, and Bolas at least is in prison. So we're like, you're running out of big multiverse threats. I hope they don't completely neuter them. Yeah,
it sets up a good revenge storyline, I guess. So say all the Praetors get obliterated out of existence or something. Well, their, minions underneath of them, like their generals underneath, are like, we must get revenge for Elish Norn, and then become the new Praetors, like somehow find power, and then it goes that route. And then there's a war amongst themselves. That's probably what's going to happen. It's probably going to be a war amongst all of them, and they're just going to kind of implode amongst themselves.
And you have all these completed planeswalkers too, so like, assuming they don't reverse all of that's is completed Jace and Nissa, some of the main bad guys moving forward, maybe.
Oh, I got it now. This is all a dream, and Urza wakes up and decides not to create Karn. And he's just like, nope, that was a mistake.
We're way back.
That's not fair. I said somewhat of the same thing last week, and you told me that's a big no.
I don't know what you're talking about, Max.
They erased the last 15 years of Magic lore, basically.
That'd be funny. Well, that would give them, so many openings for the sets and be like, and now we go to Eldraine and it's different, or Ixalan and it's like completely different. And
man, how mad would people be? That is insane.
Oh,
I kind of hope it's like the planes we don't know where the Phyrexians are, but they're invading. When whatever happens, those Phyrexians don't get the message. So when we go back to Eldraine, we go to Ixalan, there's still going to be Phyrexians there, but they don't know the war ended or the battle is on pause for now.
Okay, I could see that too. It would actually be nice to see, though, a plane that we've never seen before, and there's actually someone super powerful there who's like the complete negation to the Phyrexians, like it can, that person, whatever they are, whether it's construct, mortal being, immortal being, or something like that, can just stop them in their tracks, but can't like defeat them per se, but just keeps them from spreading.
Oh, so it's like the cure from X-Men 3 Last Stand. Gotcha.
Something like that. Yeah, where it just where it just like, some omnipotent being or whatever just like appears and is like, bleh, and then disappears, and then so then the next sets go and all the planeswalkers and everyone's like, what was that? We need to find out what that was, so if anything happens in the future, we know where to go and all that fun jazz.
Well, one thing before we wrap up here, I wanted to also shout out is a couple moments that really I remember from our early days. Our first preview card, when we first got the first email that saying we were going to get a preview card, was nuts.
Yeah.
Having that opportunity and like feeling like we got to do that. And we got a couple ones since then, but that first one was a big deal. We got a couple early shout outs on Command Zone for different things. We got to record a little thing for their, I think, 100th episode, or maybe it was 200th, whichever one it was. And then we got referenced a few times and recorded little bits for them. That was insane to get those early email contacts. And then I remember real early on, like maybe 10 or 12 episodes in, DJ Jumbo Commander just posted a tweet, hey, been listening to Commander Central. It's a really good show. You should check it out, or something along those lines. That was also one of those moments where like I remember that one. I was literally driving to Ohio for work, which was a long, miserable drive.
It sure is.
And I got a text from, I think Max texted me, like, did you see what DJ just tweeted? And I was like, wait, what? And I literally pulled my car off to a gas station. I had to gas up anyway. And it's like, holy crap. So like, yeah, I mean, those moments early on especially, really, I still remember those things. Getting a tweet from Command Zone, getting a tweet from DJ, getting a request to record something for Command Zone, getting a card, those early moments where you felt like, oh, we're actually accomplishing something. People are actually listening to us. It's actually like resonating with folks in some way. That was really big early on.
Yeah, it was. For me personally, when those came in, like I didn't like follow Command Zone or any of them, because I'm not a big technology guy personally.
Sure.
And like you guys were like, oh yeah, we're doing this for so and so, and I'm like, awesome, let's do it, And I never like the implications never dawned on me until later on, and I'm like, oh, that was a big deal. I should have probably been, much more hyped than I was at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty impressive run here. I've really enjoyed doing it with you guys. So thanks for giving me 350 hours of your time. Well, more than that, all told. But it's been a heck of a run. So thanks a lot to both of you two.
Now I wish that we had outtakes that we could post for people.
Don't say that out loud. Raphael might.
Right. He's got a greatest hits playlist he's gonna post for episode 351.
Oh, I'm sure he does. He sent us a few of those where he's like, this one's funny, and he's like got a clip for us.
He has before. I should ask him if he's saved any of that stuff. Well, hey, any final thoughts from the two of you here before we wrap it up and head on out?
I'll just second what you said, Dana. Thank you to both of you for doing this for 5.5 years. Thank you to the community that we've been able to build, and we're going to keep hanging out and playing virtual EDH and doing all that. When I look back a few years from now, I'm going to be really proud of what we've done with this. So
absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, final words on this. It's going to be sad. This kind of feels like, when you watch a show and it ends and you're like, now I'm sad because I don't have that anymore. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now about that, where it's just like, So I'm definitely going to sit back and, I guarantee in a couple weeks I'm going to message you guys and be like, so any new ideas?
Yeah, we'll get that random Monday morning message from Chris. So what are we recording this week?
Yeah. Yeah, that's like I said. I'm glad we've left that opportunity open too for things down the road. So this is not the last you all will hear from us. It's just the last you'll hear from us regularly. But thanks to I've thanked you guys. We thank Raphael. Thanks to listeners in the community as well. We wouldn't have done this without all y'all out there. So that does mean a lot as well. Thanks to everyone, just everyone. So
all
right, y'all. That is gonna wrap up episode 350 of Commander Central. I'm Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR Central _Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. The show is edited by Raphael Garcia. You can find them on Twitter at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We won't be back next week, but we will eventually be back at some point just to say hey. Until then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
All right. That was quick. Succinct. To the point.
Sure.